Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Secretary Nielsen, Senator Peters, during this committee hearing, asked how long is too long to detain a child, and you went on to testify that your agency does not detain children. However, it appears that there is some conflict then between your understanding and what the IG reported in September of 2018, when in that report, which I have here, and I'm sure you've read it, there was a finding that CBP held children separated from their parents for extended periods of time in facilities intended solely for short-term detention, despite assertions by you that children were being transferred to HHS within 72 hours, as is statutorily required. For example, in the Rio Grande Valley sector, 27% of children were in CBP custody for more than 5 days, and in the El Paso sector, 23% of children were in CBP custody for more than 5 days. And in one case, in the Rio Grande sector, I believe a child was held in CBP custody for 25 days. How do you reconcile the testimony you provided this committee with the report from the IG?
So I think there's two separate topics. The one that you were describing is when we apprehend a family unit, or what you're talking about is an unaccompanied child, we, as soon as possible, process that child, which means we give them initial medical screen. We ascertain if they have family members as best we can in the United States. Where
but Secretary, I just have a minute left.
Okay.
You testified that you don't detain children.
We do not.
The IG report indicates that
we do
CBP,
not have,
which is, I'm not finished. The IG report indicates that CBP has detained children, and not only has CBP detained children, they've detained them for longer than is statutorily allowed. How do you reconcile the IG report with your testimony this morning?
We do not detain children. What we do is when we apprehend them at a Border Patrol station, we process them, and as soon as there is room in an HHS facility, we transfer them. Because of the
So does the processing involve detention?
It's not detention facility.
Do they stay in CBP custody? Do they spend the night there?
We are not able to, under the law, put them anywhere else, so we will care for them until bed space opens at a detention facility at HHS.
In other words, you do detain children.
In other words, we do not have enough detention facility at HHS because 10,000 children were sent here unaccompanied, and their parents chose to do that.
Thank you.
It is Thursday, the 11th of October of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, folks. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Oh, my. You know, this storm, Michael, has some effect even over in New Orleans. And I just gotta posit this question, just a little bit. Posit a question? I don't know what that means, but the question is, why is there a Cat 5, almost a Cat 5 hurricane in October hitting Georgia? Give me a break. Everybody says, "Oh my God, look what it's done to Florida." Yeah, but a hurricane in Georgia. And then it goes up that southeastern seaboard, goes back out to sea. What's it going to do there? cycle into a storm and then come back and hit New York? No one's talked about that. They just presume the water's going to be cold enough for it to just die out. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. What if it cycles and then becomes another monster storm? Has anyone thought of that? Well, as if we can do anything about it. And I know what Trump will do. He'll hightail it out of town and have a Nuremberg rally somewhere where he can talk about locking up every woman, 85, 86-year-old women. He wants to lock them up. Yeah, I know they just happen to be Dianne Feinstein. I just have to say, I'm no big fan of Dianne Feinstein, but no one's locking up Dianne Feinstein on my watch. Because it's looking really bad in terms of the T word. We're way past the I word. That's right. What goes around comes around. Well, there was quite a few different reportages dropped. And the New Yorker article with Olivia Nuzzi, my God. That is a frightening article. But it's only frightening to us because the people that love Trump think that everything that he does and is a virtue. These are the stories that we've curated for you today. And, of course, we're in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, where the Department of Veterans Affairs refuses to hand over documents to Congress that shows undue influence Trump associates have over agency policy. Yeah. Well, I don't know. That's a fancy way of saying that grifters got a grift. White supremacist anti-immigrant posters pop up in Queens, and I don't know, I would say, wow, you'd expect that in Long Island, but Queens. And Russian dossier author Christopher Steele breaks his silence and condemns Trump in an email to Vanity Fair. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where all of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, except Rand Paul, signed the letter that triggers the investigation into missing Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And Chief Justice John Roberts referred judicial misconduct complaints about Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, right when they won't be able to do anything about it. Hey, in comedy, they always say it's all about the timing. And all that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Our homepage at netrootsradio.com, we have some links right there as you open the page. And what a beautiful homepage we have. I have to admit, that was put together by Tom. Thanks, Tom. And there are links there in which you can determine if you are registered to vote and also to vote. So it's rock the vote, folks. And it's very important that we turn out in mass numbers. And all of us have to man the barricades. Damn right. We need to, take our country back again. We keep doing this. Okay, so please do determine if you're registered to vote. There's a lot of voter purges going on, and you may think that you are registered, but you may not be. So determine that, and please do vote on November 6th. Also, or earlier if you can, we have voter by vote here, vote by mail here in Oregon, and automatic motor registration too, motor voter registration too. So we're lucky, but not everybody is. So do be proactive. Be determined that you are registered to vote, and please do vote. If you then go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. So do engage there. Check out her show on Saturday. It is At the Table with Kelly Lincoln. That is at 3 p.m. on the West Coast, 6 p.m. on the East Coast. And then later, she teams up with Ricky, and they command the Roundtable Roundhouse Power Hour, beginning at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast, and a power hour it is. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the contribute button. And do become a Patreon of Netroots Radio. If you could afford to even buy us 1 cup of coffee a month, that would be so helpful. Times are tough, I realize, but if you can, it just helps Resistance Radio keep this modem blinking in the proper order and that we pay our bills. So thank you for your generosity. You can follow the show on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Follow us on Facebook. We have a live Facebook thing that Kelly takes care of. Thanks, Kelly, for that. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And also, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. I will remind you, and for those who've never heard this before, I'll just tell you, that's an integral part to the show because all the show notes and links and more is right there, and we are a multimedia operation indeed. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Follow us on Facebook and pick up podcasts of the show, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeart, YouTube, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, enough of that. Let's see here. The Veterans Affairs. The packing of not only the courts with a bunch of, I don't know, weirdos that the right wing has been doing for many decades is astounding in and of its right. But the speed in which the Trump administration has been able to get all these grifters into all of these various departments and just weasel their way in is fairly astounding. It's almost like they have help because Trump doesn't know how to do this. It's like rotting it from the very core. Who would do that? I have my suspicions. Now let's remember, there was a bombshell investigation by ProPublica in August that revealed 3 of Trump's closest associates, Ike Perlmutter, that's the CEO of Marvel Entertainment, Bruce Moskowitz, who works in concierge medicine, wow, and they call us the elites, and Mark Sherman, an attorney, have ruled the VA, that's the Veterans Administration, as unappointed and unconfirmed shadow officials from their base at Trump's Mar-a-Lago Club in Palm Beach, Florida. Wow. The Southern White House. Veterans Affairs Secretary Robert Wilkie assured lawmakers at a hearing last month that the Mar-a-Lago crowd, as it's known within the agency, doesn't set policy, but emails published by ProPublica tell a very different story. The reports of corruption and cronyism are serious, and we cannot allow VA to sweep this under the rug, Representative Tim Waltz, Democrat of Minnesota, the ranking member on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, said in a statement to the Military Times. This issue will remain a top concern of the committee until all our questions have been answered. Wilkie declined to give committee Democrats correspondence between the Mar-a-Lago crowd and VA officials due to the ongoing litigation alleging violations of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. Do you notice how all sorts of things that used to be in the public domain are now, secret, a state secret? Waltz balked at that suggestion, which he called unacceptable, and is demanding the documents by month's end. But the documents do not appear to be under subpoena, because you need the Republicans to do that. At least, bipartisan. It's not the first time Veterans Affairs has run afoul of Congress for refusing to hand over documents or give an oversight committee access to key officials. Both Republicans and Democrats on House Veterans Affairs slammed the agency in 2015 when Congress was investigating allegations of waste and abuse after 2 of the 5 officials of the committee subpoenaed pleaded the fifth. I remember that. Veterans Affairs has been roiled by controversy in recent months. Trump took to Twitter in March to fire former Secretary David Shulkin, who had been under a heavy cloud of alleged ethics violations. But the ProPublica investigation suggested Shulkin's departure may have had less to do with his ethical lapses than with his increasing disfavor with Perlmutter, Moskowitz, and Sherman. Wow. The Mar-a-Lago stooges is what I would call them. Trump nominated White House physician Rear Admiral Ronnie Jackson to replace Shulkin, but we know what happened to him. Yeah, handing out drugs, kind of being a little tipsy. The ProPublica investigation suggested Wilkie, the new VA head, may be looking to cut his own path without interference from the Mar-a-Lago crowd, but how much influence Trump's associates still have within the agency remains unclear. And of course, I failed to mention that Joshua Eaton wrote that first article out of Think Progress. And as it stands, we have another article here out of Think Progress, this time by Casey Michelle. New York City Council member Jimmy Van Bramer headed out for a jog in Queens last Sunday. Something out of the ordinary quickly caught his eye, an anti-immigrant poster geared toward anyone who might be sympathetic to white nationalist messaging. And the text was not subtle. Addressed to all citizens of the United States of America, it read, quote, "It is your civic duty to report any and all illegal aliens to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They have broken the law." There, underneath the text, was a phone number for ICE. "Have a nice day," the poster closed. The posters, 2 of which have been discovered thus far, were a chilling sight in immigrant-heavy Sunnyside, Queens, the population of which is roughly 1/3 Hispanic, 1/3 Asian American, and nearly 1/3 white. They were similar in both content and structure. White nationalist posters have appeared on several college campuses over the past year, such as those at Stanford and Rutgers. With its simple black and white design, topped by a notice header, the poster style also harkened back to one of America's darkest chapters, placards announcing Executive Order 9066, the Roosevelt administration's post-Pearl Harbor diktat that all Japanese residents on the West Coast, as well as all Americans of Japanese ancestry, would have to spend most of the remainder of the war in internment camps, with neither recourse nor appeal. So, Van Bremer did what any good citizen would do. He tore the posters down and filmed it to send a clear message to anyone watching. It is ludicrous to say that it's your civic duty to report someone you believe to be undocumented, he told Think Progress. I wanted other people to know that if they see something like this, you tear it down. The posters, at least now 4 in total, both found in Queens, followed a years-long campaign from young white supremacists to trumpet their hateful views publicly and to recruit others in their causes. Thus far, the bulk of those efforts appear limited to college campuses from Texas to Washington State. Now, the appearance of the anti-immigrant posters in Queens indicates these messages are also bleeding into the public square. Well, I would say that the true brown shirts did this. You go into the identified community and terrorize them. There's a group called Vanguard America, and of course, you know, they gained notoriety because of Charlottesville. And this Vanguard's fingerprints have appeared among those collecting Nazi memorabilia. College students in Nebraska and other white nationalists have become some of the most openly fascist splinter groups recently formed. Hey, Nebraska, Cornhusker Nazism. There haven't been any reports of anti-immigrant posters appearing elsewhere in New York, and no one has taken responsibility for those Van Bramer discovered. But for the council member, these are already too many. This is garbage. This is hatred, Van Bremer said at a press conference, and this has no place in the borough of Queens. This is an act of hate. This is about intimidating people, and it is disgusting. Brings us this last offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasies. And we have Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays here today, folks. Indeed. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. The man at the center of the infamous Trump-Russia dossier is speaking out after more than a year of public silence, criticizing the president and applauding those with the courage to hold the government to account. I should interject that the Network's radio style manual really precludes me from ever using the P word with Trump. But sometimes we have to include it so that the flow of someone else's essay, has flow. So I apologize for that. We usually don't refer to him as the P word. Christopher Steele, a former MI6 officer, has been the target of Trump's wrath since January of 2017, when a dossier containing sordid allegations of collusion and misconduct between Trump and key Russian figures was published online. Steele compiled the dossier in the second half of 2016 after being hired by opposition research firm Fusion GPS, which was contracted with both Republican and Democrat parties to dig up information on Trump. I should maybe be a little bit of an editor for this writer here. It is the Democratic Party, please. 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 Though Trump has derided the dossier as fake news and the impetus for what he has repeatedly referred to as a partisan witch hunt, the intelligence community has concluded at least some of his allegations are authentic. And I should add here also that not one of the allegations is proved not to be true. Not one. There's a lot maybe there that hasn't been proven one way or the other, but it hasn't been proven not true. That it never happened. I'm just saying. And let's not forget who Christopher Steele is. Okay. Before all of this happened, he was one of the most highly respected Russian experts in intelligence. So there. No wonder Trump thinks it's fake news, because anything he doesn't agree with has to be fake. Because he was put on here, this earth, this good green earth, put on here by God. And he truly believes that. And, look at how Goebbels considered himself just to be a vessel of God. Well, last week, Steele was included on Vanity Fair's establishment list, along with other political and intelligence figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Beto O'Rourke, Michelle Obama, and Special Counsel Robert Mueller. High-profile activist figures, including members of the Me Too movement and Parkland students advocating for gun reform, were also included. Oh, the violent crowd of liberal Democrats. Yeah, that's what we are. What are you? Steele subsequently responded to Vanity Fair editor-in-chief Radhika Jones, declining an apparent invitation to the New Establishment Summit, but praising the publication for including crucial watchdog figures and activists on its list. I was surprised and honored, particularly as a Brit, to be included in this list, he wrote in the email. And that was according to Sky News Foreign Affairs editor Deborah Haynes. I find myself in the company of many talented and distinguished people, although I personally would not accord such accolades to some of the foreign nationals included on the list. Steele appeared to be referencing the outlet's inclusion of such figures as Russian President Vladimir Putin and Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman. Oh my. In these strange and troubling times, it is hard to speak unpalatable truths to power, but I believe we all still have a duty to do so. I salute those on your list and otherwise who have had the courage to speak out over the last year, often at great personal cost. Then he added, at a time when governance is so distorted and one-sided, as I believe it currently is in the United States, the media has a key role to play in holding it accountable. Now, it wasn't immediately clear whether Steele was referring to the specific figures on the publication's list, though several of them have come under fire from the White House in recent months for their role in a number of separate controversies. Trump, for instance, has repeatedly claimed the Me Too era has proven dangerous to men, most recently claiming in the wake of several sexual assault allegations against newly confirmed Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh that it was a scary time for young men in America. I should add that if it's a scary time for young men in America, then the parents did not raise that kid very well now, did they? You can be an exemplary person for 35 years, and then somebody comes in and they say, you did this or you did that, and they give 3 witnesses at this point who do not corroborate what they're saying. Well, Trump said all that BS to reporters. How many allegations do we have of Trump? I mean, walking in on teenage girls in a beauty pageant. And how many of those have corroborated that? Yeah, it's a scary situation for, mashers. Sexual abusers, let's call them that. Aside from repeatedly calling the probe a witch hunt, Trump has attempted to derail the investigation on multiple occasions, firing key Justice Department figures and claiming Mueller and his team are biased against him. Well, every mafia don says that. Of Steele specifically, Trump has been especially blunt, if infrequent, calling the former intelligence officer's work fraudulent. Really? The big story that the fake news media refuses to report is low-life Christopher Steele's meetings with Deputy AG Bruce Orr and his beautiful wife Nellie. Yeah. Bruce Orr, the #1 guy who's been bringing down Russia mob figures. Of course, Trump's going to think that they are in cahoots against him. And Trump has also claimed that Steele had colluded with Russia to keep him from the presidency. And now Trump's even saying that Hillary colluded with Russia to keep him from the presidency. Last time I looked, and I got to tell you, the Network's radio style manual really precludes me from using the P word here. But I got to tell you, the last time I looked, Trump is the elected president. Let's get to our break. And when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world. Yes, we need a break. We'll go through weather from around the world and then finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Just like humans have virtually unique sets of fingerprints, every giraffe has a unique set of spots. Not that those spot patterns really help wildlife biologists identify their study subjects in real time.
We have more than 3,000 individuals, so I have a hard time myself just keeping track of a few humans. So I have a trouble with giraffes' patterns as well.
Derek Lee is a wildlife biologist and population ecologist at Penn State and with the Wild Nature Institute, a research consultancy group. He and his collaborators have been tracking giraffes for 7 years throughout 1,500 square miles in Tanzania. And they've amassed a library of 70,000 giraffe photos along the way. Photographing the animals isn't that hard, he says.
The hard part is the tsetse flies constantly biting us in our face and hands while we're trying to take pictures.
Now they've used image analysis software to study the spots of mothers and their calves. And they found that baby giraffes inherit at least some particular elements of their patterning from their moms, like how circular the spots are and how jagged the edges are. They also found that calves with larger spots were more likely to survive their first months on the savanna, perhaps because the spots better mimic the dappled sunlight in the bushes, where calves like to hide from hungry lions and hyenas. The results, and a lot of giraffe patterns, are in the journal Pure J. It's perhaps not surprising that a physical characteristic that protects an individual from being eaten passes the test of Darwinian natural selection and gets passed along to offspring.
The fact that these things are heritable and they did affect juvenile survival makes us feel like evolution is acting on these spot traits.
So if mom's camouflage is good, her babies too might have the spots that make them harder to spot. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Heart disease and stroke can be catastrophic. They're leading causes of death, disability, and healthcare spending in the U.S., yet they're largely preventable. Alarmingly, heart disease and stroke are taking a toll on middle-aged adults 35 to 64, with over 800,000 deaths and hospitalizations in 2016. Million Hearts is a national initiative focused on preventing 1 million heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular events by 2022. Coordinated actions by Million Hearts partners in communities, healthcare, and public health will keep people healthy, optimize care, and improve outcomes in populations at risk. Everyone has a part to play. Focus on the ABCs of heart health. A. Aspirin use when appropriate. B. Blood pressure control. C. Cholesterol management. And S. Smoking cessation. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Someone needs to buy a Grassroots USA tour package for the members of Donald Trump's Council of Economic Advisors, so they can at least visit the real world one time in their lives. The three advisors are ivory tower ideologues whose sole professional expertise seems to be twisting reality to fit their boss's right-wing fantasia. In July, for example, the trio issued a fairy tale disguised as an official government report on poverty, essentially asserting that our U.S. of A. no longer has a poverty problem. Poof, declared these learned ones from on high. The need for food stamps, Medicaid, public housing, and other assistance has virtually disappeared in our land. Jobs abound, they lectured. The economy is pumping out great gobs of new wealth, and bluebirds of happiness are spreading joy everywhere. You can imagine the comfort that this report has brought to the 45 million Americans now living below the poverty line. That line means they're trying to make ends meet on only $25,000 a year. Not per person, but for a family of 4. Let's see any of Trump's advisors try to live on that before smugly claiming that poverty is largely over. What's at work here is the political manipulation of statistics to support Trump's ideological delusion that poor people are losers who are addicted to safety net programs. As a narcissistic son of privilege, he is out to cut those programs and to impose strict work requirements on families seeking public assistance. Never mind that most recipients of aid already work, subjected to the hardships of poverty by the low wages of their jobs. This is Jim Hightower saying, but that's the real world. And it doesn't mesh with Trump and company's cruel self-deception that basic humane benefits make poverty too pleasant. They're imposing a Dickensian governing ethic that is fundamentally obscene. And even more obscene, it's un-American.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Here are some questions remaining from the Kavanaugh confirmation. Ready? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. When the issue of partisan gerrymandering next comes before the Supreme Court, do you think the court will strike down those undemocratic lines that effectively keep powerful politicians in their elected positions? When voter suppression is next considered, do you think the court will stand up for equal protection for people of color? When the issue presented concerns the power of the executive branch, do you think this Supreme Court will say no to Donald Trump? Do you think that a woman claiming sexual harassment or a transgender person seeking equal rights actually can win at this court? Do you really believe that the political ideology of the justices won't play an important, perhaps the most important part in their decisions? The fact that you can already, before the case is ever argued, predict with a high degree of certainty how the case will be decided says a lot. As the Federalist Society's David Marcus recently wrote in the New York Times, quote, "The Supreme Court exercises its power not through control of the purse, that's a legislative prerogative, or the military, controlled by the executive branch, but through the faith of the American people. If that faith is sufficiently shaken, the most vital check that Americans have on elected power could be shattered." Any more questions? The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Thursday, October 11th, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. In Zimbabwe, police have beaten and arrested the president of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, Peter Mutasa, and Secretary General Japhet Mayo. Another 33 trade unionists have been detained. More than 150 police surrounded the offices of the ZCTU in Harare in an effort to stop a demonstration against a tax increase which would severely hit workers in the country. There had been hopes that Zimbabwe would become more democratic and respect workers' rights after the resignation of former President Robert Mugabe last year. But labor leaders in the country have warned about the increased militarization of Zimbabwe. I talked recently to Vimbai Zinyama, the ZCTU's external relations officer, and asked her if Mugabe's departure had improved the situation for unions in the country. She said,
"No, I do not think that would be anything anyone can say at the moment, because the situation in Zimbabwe is that we are slowly turning into a military state, and that in itself does not correlate very well with the aspirations of democracy and good governance, which the trade unions are always up for. What we perceive possibly is that the situation is going to get worse with the militarization efforts. A lot of the departments have presence of the army, which may either be visible or invisible. It will mean that the space for negotiation and proper policy dialogue or social dialogue will be closed. So I do not perceive a time when things are going to be better unless there is intervention.
As a labor leader in Zimbabwe, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of the country?
There are two answers to that question. I'm optimistic in that if there is enough pressure that is maintained on principled grounds, then things may turn out differently. Our only fear is that if the international community and all the other friends of Zimbabweans start to think that, there's a change and things have got better, then everybody loses track and focus on what are the real issues. And then there's an element of trying to prioritize that if we just manage to achieve some kind of social justice, which is possibly likened to either another country, then people will think that things are okay. Then that will put me in the pessimistic approach, in that the stronger global friends may just be satisfied with somewhat achievement of semblance of a peaceful environment, which is not so peaceful or which is not developmental. So there are two things, in my view, that if the world keeps up the need to monitor, the need for justice, the need for social and economic development to take place, and the need to ensure that human rights are respected in the process. If all that is taken into one basket, which is achievable because a lot of it does not cost money, it just costs commitment and principles of a system. That's what puts me on an optimistic pathway.
What can unions and their members do to help the labor movement in Zimbabwe?
At this point in time, you need to be propped up to be able to interface with the new demands of the new situation, one having to deal with quasi-military institution that is now presenting itself.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently, here at the mothership at Netroots Radio, we are currently at 40 degrees, though we are under a frost advisory for the region. It looked like we didn't really dip here in my little microclimate below 40. But I did harvest almost all of the tomatoes and what other vegetables I had that are before our fall crop. Just to be sure. Now, we will be a bit warmer today than yesterday. We're going to go up to be in the mid-70s, and we were just about upper 60s, about 70 degrees yesterday. Winds are currently out of the west-northwest and are light and variable and will remain so until till tonight, where they will shift out of the north-northeast and blow at about 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then remain that way through the night until tomorrow morning, and then they'll be light and variable. No indication on their direction then, but probably still out of the north-northeast. All right, so it looks like ragweed pollen remains high. That air quality index is good, though it's gone up to 20 parts per million, probably indicative of people burning wood in their fireplaces. And the daytime UV index is moderate at 4, which is our fall range, indeed. Barometric pressure is holding steady right now at 30.25 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles. And relative humidity is at 32%. Okay, so weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 68 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 78 and sunny, and they have a thunderstorm advisory in October. Unbelievable. Rome is 69 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 60 and fair. Kabul is 58 and fair. Well, not for wedding parties. Don't go outside. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 72 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 and mostly cloudy, and they have a wind advisory for small craft on the bay and offshore. And New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit, showers in the vicinity, and you are under a heavy rain advisory because I think Michael is sending its little tendrils your way. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted. These purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Joshua Eaton of Think Progress brings us this first offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Well, the U.S. Senate took steps to trigger an investigation into the disappearance of dissident Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Turkish officials have said the Saudi government murdered Khashoggi inside its consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. And, of course, the Saudi government denies those allegations, but Khashoggi has not been seen or heard from since he walked into the embassy over a week ago to obtain documents he needed to marry his Turkish fiancée. And her name is Hatice Cengiz, a wedding that was scheduled for Wednesday before Khashoggi disappeared. Now, in a letter to Donald Trump, around 24 senators, including all but one member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I'm looking at you, Rand Paul. How many rubles are in your pocket? And that asked the White House to investigate whether Khashoggi is a victim of a gross violation of internationally recognized human rights. Trump now must report his findings and his determination of whether anyone involved should face U.S. sanctions back to Congress within 120 days under the global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act. You know, the one that Putin wants to have overturned. Our expectations is that in making your determination, you will consider any relevant information, including with respect to the highest-ranking officials in the government of Saudi Arabia, the letter read. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said yesterday, two senior officials, Jared Kushner and John Bolton, have spoke with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the country's de facto ruler, and asked for more details and for the Saudi government to be transparent in the investigation process. Turkish officials released new evidence yesterday, including video that they said shows how a 15-person Saudi team killed Khashoggi within 2 hours of when he first entered the consulate, then drove to the consulate general's residence. Yeah, unloaded a bunch of boxes there. I wonder what they were. This is a bad situation, Trump told reporters at the White House earlier on Wednesday. We can't let this happen, reporters, to anybody. We're going to take a serious look at it, Trump added. Now, Khashoggi was working to start a new Arab pro-democracy organization when he disappeared. Reports of his murder inside the Saudi consulate have spurred an international outcry. The New York Times even pulled its sponsorship from an investment conference in Riyadh, the Saudi capital, in response. Still, many have criticized the White House for seeming to drag its feet in responding to the crisis. Trump and bin Salman have enjoyed a warm relationship, and the Crown Prince's relationship with Kushner is even warmer. Yes, indeed. Kushner passed the names of disloyal Saudi royals, it was reported in The Intercept earlier this year, to bin Salman during a visit to Saudi Arabia last year. And bin Salman later bragged about having Kushner in his pocket. Trump had harsh words for Saudi Arabia in a recent campaign rally, accusing it of taking advantage of U.S. security assurances, but he steered clear of directly criticizing bin Salman yesterday. I always found him to be a fine man.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Finishing up here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is an article out of Alternet by Cody Fenwick. Chief Justice John Roberts referred judicial misconduct complaints about newly confirmed Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Colorado, the Washington Post reported on Wednesday afternoon. The 15 complaints refer to Kavanaugh's behavior after Christine Blasey Ford made her allegations of sexual assault against Kavanaugh public, and the Post cited sources who said the complaints addressed Kavanaugh's alleged dishonesty and lack of judicial temperament. While some of the complaints against Kavanaugh were dismissed, the remaining allegations have been passed on because they were deemed substantial. However, the article notes that it's unlikely anything that will come of the complaints because once you're a Supreme Court justice, you don't need to recuse yourself at any time, even though the Democrats always do. Isn't that funny how that works? Well, we're going to have to recuse ourselves and get out of here just a tad early. And but we will be back tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, and because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio for the rest of the day for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.